morning, everyone. The reason for my tardiness is I'm not going to point fingers at anybody, but Dallas spent the first few minutes before class coming in and taking the chairs out of the class. And so he was saying without saying that evidently other classes are more popular than my class, and I had to go to the other classes to see where everybody was voting with their feet and leaving my class. So it was Dallas who made me feel unworthy, unwelcome, and unwanted. So
thanks for not pointing that out.
All right, did I do something wrong here? Let's see. Probably. All right, there we go. Now we are recording. All right. Good morning, everybody. It is, I am loud today. Okay. Today is the last class for this quarter, if I got this correct. And it better be because I only prepared one last lesson for this class. But as you have learned, Mark likes to talk. So if it came to a second week, I think I could put something together to be able to talk. But we have been talking about how to build stronger families. And so I've started all of these classes and done this quarter with a goal in mind, a thought to get us through each class. Some may have been more helpful than others. I hope they have all been helpful in one way or another. But we're finishing up. And I started, if we go back and remember at all, is I started by saying we are all adopted sons and daughters of Christ. Okay? And that concept of adoption, okay, is the concept of passing on an inheritance to somebody that we recognize as family. Normally, and those rules get very, there's a lot of emotion tied up in those. Who gets what when the older generation passes on? That tends to break relationships if it's not done right. But Christ came and told us we are all adopted sons and daughters. It is no longer the Jewish nation that holds the promise, because the reason for that promise is me. I came, I'm of course summing up and putting my own words on it. The promise came through Joseph. I have come, here is who I am, and now it's no longer this way that you access me, but now it's everybody. And that is made through our belief in him and our following of his words. So we all, roughly speaking, generalized, by our belief in who Jesus is, that is how we come to the Father, and we worship him in spirit and in truth. And I have talked about various things, the good and the bad of how to make stronger marriage. Some, in my opinion, some with the biblical concepts that we have. And I've emphasized some things and skipped over a lot because there's only a certain amount of time to talk about things. There are enough men in here to answer this question, but I'm going to emphasize in the closing class, drawing an artificial close to this, I'm going to emphasize 3 different things today. Okay? Number 1, and that can be found for reference, 1 Corinthians, one place of it. But men, what are we told to do? What specific instruction are we given toward our wives?
Love.
What was that?
Love.
Love.
It says love.
These aren't trick questions. They're very simple. They're very basic. Men are told, love your wives. because love does not come natural to us, and it is something that if we men, and I still find it incomprehensible to me when I ask Allie, who for us the roles are kind of reversed a little bit. I'm the one who likes to say it and hear it and give hugs, and Allie's more of the, well, I told you I loved you the day we got married, I'll let you know when it changes type of person. Okay? But we are told, men, love your wives because it doesn't come natural, and with our single focus that we have, we can forget, we can elevate all of the other things, providing that for which I love and create, and forget to love it because we're so focused on the pursuit of what we're trying to do. But at the same time, the Bible doesn't use this word necessarily, but the concept is there, is that what are women, because women are told something also, if you have the ability to love, maybe you're cursed from Eve that you will love your husband, but if you love naturally, what is the thing that you're told to do toward your husband? Respect. Honor, because that doesn't come naturally. Those of us who are married, who have been married, do know this concept, okay? And I will get into the actual verses, but we do know this concept, at least, is that if men are told to love and women are told to respect, we have trouble grasping the level of emotional importance to those words and to what we are told to do. So I'm going to ask women specifically, not a trick question, but this is a question for women. What does respect toward your husband mean? What have you learned that means? Because I emphasize this, and we talked about this in an earlier class, but it means something different, I have learned, through experience, between men and women. So to you women, what does respect mean to you toward your husband? Does anybody want to venture?
Sharing appreciation of the things that he does to take care and provide for our family. I don't belittle him. I don't, do things to tease him in ways that he would find disrespectful.
Thank you for saying that. When you say you don't belittle, and I'm amplifying because I agree with your statement. When you say I don't belittle and tease, of that action, where is that most important to not do? Behind the closed doors of your own home, or out at a party, or out at a social gathering? Where is that most important to not do, to belittle and tease and joke with?
So we don't want to do that in front of other people, right? Because we don't want them to belittle our husbands either. So we don't do it anywhere, right? Just because that's something that we talked about early on in our marriage, right? We had a very playful relationship before we were married, and then we were like, okay, now we're married, these can't go on, right? But we don't do it anywhere, but especially not in front of other people.
It is vitally important that a wife is seen to be respectful of her husband. To put it in another way, when I was thinking about this, these are the words that I say to Allie all the time, okay? Being that I was a law enforcement officer, she doesn't do something very well. And I tell her, I go, sweetheart, there's a concept that is, you know what? Back your partner's play. That means when you're out with your partner, and your partner is doing something, taking the lead that you don't know, that you don't understand in the moment, as long as it's not walking out into the middle of traffic, something that is imminently harmful to your life, shut your mouth, be quiet. This is in the law enforcement. I'm not telling Allie to shut her mouth. I'm saying, but with my partner, you keep your mouth shut. You watch what your partner's doing, and you respond to the lead of your partner. And then when you don't understand, you wait till the situation is done and go, why did you do that? And then you find out, well, your partner saw the person that was hanging out in the corner at the edge of the street that was watching what was going on, or that this person had a bulge on the side of their hip that he was probably carrying, and so I'm going to act in a manner that seems illogical. But if you jump in the middle of it, then you mess everything up and create more danger. So that's the concept of backing your partner's play. Translated into the marital relationship, there are going to be times, and I'm sure you have found it, that your husband does something that you don't understand in the moment that seems a little crazy, illogical, comes forward with a plan to do something, and you're like, whoa, wait. The moment to handle that is not publicly to belittle his ideas, because that is a lack of respect to a man. The time for discussion is at a different time when things are calm, and go, can you please explain your thought process, because this seems illogical to me. Because he felt respect from you in that time, most of the time he will open up and talk about that. As soon as we feel disrespect coming from our spouse, that translates to, you didn't tell me you love me, you don't love me, you don't do anything to show that you care about me. That's what we feel, but we don't have the words, so how do we react? We react with anger. We lash out. We get sulky. We turn our back and do all the things, and then you sit and belittle us because you feel us pulling away, and we don't have the words to calmly say, well, you disrespected me, because then that leads to a bigger fight. And we just go, I will eat the disrespect for peace, because we value peace in our relationships. So there are two concepts that I've talked about that hopefully over the course of this class that I have illuminated: love that husbands need to show for their wives, and the acts that we need to do to help with that. Because all of those things are individually tailored to the individual bents of our spouse. Yes?
Okay, so can I challenge that?
Can you speak up a little, because I am hard of hearing?
Can I challenge that?
Absolutely.
Okay, so if you don't tell your wife it was disrespectful, it's going to continue happening in your marriage.
Correct.
So, at what point would you say, you know what, I'm just gonna say it, even if it doesn't have to turn into a fight, right? So, I can say something to Dallas and he can get really mad and yell, and I don't have to engage, right? We don't have to have a fight about it, right?
Mhm.
Not that that ever actually happens, but I don't have to engage, right? So it doesn't have to necessarily turn into a fight. But I'm just saying, like, if it's not said, how can we repair that part of our relationship?
Concepts being, as I've illustrated, and I'm going to go back to re-illustrate, concepts, that word, when do I go to engage? I've put on kind of a timeline, so to speak. Think of it on your mind. When do I engage with disrespect? Well, we measure that concept by its excess. Disrespect means I don't listen to anything you say and I'm contemptuous. And disrespect meaning I accidentally offended you on its deficiencies, or its excesses and deficiencies. When you accidentally disrespect, you made a joke that you thought was fine, it landed bad. Dallas probably doesn't even engage with that. He just, well, that's just the way it is, because it's not something that needs to be addressed. There are times where you're not taking score in the marriage. Obviously, successful marriages don't keep track of all of the hurts, but there comes a time where the disrespect that has happened, that you have to engage with it, and you have, at least I do, because I've done this several times with Allie. I don't need to engage with it 1, 2, 3 times, and then all of a sudden the 4th time I'm like, we need to sit and have a conversation. You've done this, this, and this. Yes, I may have let something slide too many times, but then we get to the point of, I want you to realize and go back. This happened, this happened, this happened. And now I need to say, I have felt hurt, belittled, disrespected. And most of the time, there's been a couple in a 29-year marriage that it was an actual issue that we had to. Most of the time, she goes, I don't remember. I don't even think, I wasn't even thinking what you're saying I was thinking. It doesn't matter what you were thinking, it mattered what was done, and that's how it landed, and I perceived it, and I'm taking care of it now, because that's something that is hurtful. So it has to be dealt with at some point, but men have a capacity, when we love our spouses, to forgive that which is done inadvertently, by accident. Like you said, we don't have to make sure the table is right at all times, because I can filter that through and go, you really didn't mean to hurt my feelings. You did hurt my feelings. Is this enough for me to get into an argument about? No. So I move on. Maybe that means it happens a few times, but that's me making a choice for peace as opposed to deal with it, which deal with it immediately. And would know, I believe, that it only becomes something that needs to be dealt with when one spouse feels the disrespect or the lack of love shown reaches a level to where it now has become the first and last thing I think of in the day, and we need to sit and talk about it. So I think did I answer your question? Yeah, sometimes we need to deal with it, sometimes we don't, but it's a process of educating each other. Allison's, my wife's, way of expressing or having love expressed to her because of how she grew up is doing things for her, acts of service. I cannot get in my mind that when I get up and do the dishes and do the laundry and do 1, 2, 3, mow the lawn without being told, I cannot get there in my mind, even though I've been told, you want to show me you love me? Do these things, and I get that feeling of you care about me. Because it's too far removed from what my viewpoint of love is, which is, tell me you love me, give me a hug, give me a kiss, be close. It's not that the roles are reversed, it's just that's meaningful to me, and this is. So to her, as you can probably guess, that's something that she would rather not do and do anything else but for a lot of the times. But that's the way things are in marriage. A lot of times the meaningful expression of love between two spouses is often at odds with what you're comfortable with, but we are deferential, we learn, and men learn it to love their spouse and do things the way their spouse wants to show love. And you respect us by doing those things that we ask or don't do because we've asked. Just don't do it. I'd rather you not do it and have me do it because it's so meaningful to me. And so you don't do it. So those things are something that we learn over the course of time by two people working very hard to learn to be respectful of each other and caring for each other. Now, we have one more thing that I will say, admit, acknowledge that I have given tremendous short shrift to in this class, and that for the last 20 minutes I'd like to concentrate on. Because we as Christians have something that everything we've talked about up to this moment, everybody has. If you're an atheist, you could sit in this class and probably feel mostly pretty comfortable because it's concepts that we've been talking about. But we have an avenue that is something that is of vital importance, and that is prayer. That I should not have waited till the last class, but if the building blocks of a successful marriage are two people learning the different ways that love, respect, care for, activity together, if those are the building blocks, when you put a wall together and you stack all the bricks up, is it going to stay? No. You're going to walk up and you're going to be able to push it over. You have all the building blocks. You have the weight going in the right direction. You've engineered it correctly, but it still gets pushed over because there's nothing that gives it strength. And I contend is that the avenue of prayer for us provides something that is one of those things that if you were to try to express it mathematically, if you were to try to express it in a book, it's a difficult concept in which to get. And yet it's something that is found all throughout the text of our New Testament and our Old Testament, which is prayer. Because prayer allows us to do that which is illogical or difficult to do. Okay? Prayer, the avenue of prayer, number one, acknowledges what? When you're praying, you're not what you're asking for. When you stop and speak in the act of prayer, what are we doing? I'm sorry?
God's
Sovereignty, His power.
Yeah.
We're acknowledging God. So when in the moment, when my wife and I are at odds, in that moment, there may be a test of will, there is a test of wills between us, and it might be an unsolvable problem. I don't want to live in Phoenix, I want to live in Dallas. I only thought of that because I was looking at you. That is an unsolvable problems and a test of wills when one spouse says, I can no longer live here and I want to live here, and the other one says, I will never live there and I will only live here. We have a bit of an issue. Prayer acknowledges that there is a higher power that we defer to, that we have an ultimate respect for because we are going to that higher power. And when all of the emotions are raised, not all of us are calm, cool, and collected all the time. I'm sure that even Dallas gets worked up from time to time.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say it, I'm just thinking maybe he
Don't
does.
ask Becky, though.
But what does prayer allow us is to appeal to a higher power, to move ourselves out of the number one place in our marriage and realize my spouse is not the cause of my problems. My problems are my will and my desire to be sovereign in my own life. And I only know this from a male perspective, that I want to start and finish a task under my own power with nobody else giving their input so that I have a feeling of accomplishment. But the only time I can get there and do things right is not at the end when I read the plans wrong and it doesn't look like I wanted, but to start at the beginning, like I do when I come before I teach a class and say, I'm going to talk a lot, Father, but please allow everything that I say to be within your will and to be the way that you would want this class taught, so that I'm bringing forth your concepts, your ideas. That it's removing our will from the number one place and putting it where it needs to be, which is in the second place in our marriage. We are not the most important things in our life. It is acknowledging there is a God, Jesus is his son, and I'm going to start from a place of humility, that this is not a problem between my wife and I of where we want to live. This is me wanting to be sovereign in my life, wanting to do what I want, when I want, why I want. I need to start off from a different perspective. Another way, here's what I thought of when I was driving here. Most of us will get it, not all of us were alive during Ronald Reagan's presidency, is that he was asked a question once, that he was like, well, you say Republicans are right and Democrats are wrong. Did Democrats ever do anything right? And he said, it's not that the Democrats are wrong, it's just that they believe so many things that just aren't so. He was turning it in humor, but he's illustrating the point when we start from the wrong premise. We're smart, we're intelligent, we can make good decisions, but when the things that we're starting with that we believe that are true and right and correct, when the further that gets from reality, the more difficult it is to actually complete the task correctly. When you're starting from I'm right, I'm correct, and everyone must come to the mountain of right that I'm sitting on, it gets pretty difficult to humble yourself and say, I need to move back to a place of God has a plan for me. I'm not God, and I don't know what his plan is other than to believe in him, and everything else flows from there in our lives. That we forget that and we move what is first to second place, because men, we are what? Single focused. It's great, single focus. You can build the pyramids, you can do great things, but you just forget to tell everybody why you built the pyramids, where you did and why. But we did it, we started, we finished, we accomplished, but we didn't tell anybody why, because we forgot that piece of paper to say why we did it. Okay? But prayer is the mortar in the wall that allows us, that if we have married someone who is very compatible with us and we don't argue, great, fantastic. Sometimes we find that what? We have volatile personalities, and we don't end up, so we end up living life at a higher energy level than other people. At another congregation Allie and I attended, some new people moved in, and after, this happened a decade ago, but after about 6 months, these people came and they started talking to our friends, and we're like, hey, wait, Mark and Allison, are they okay? Are they going to get a divorce? And everybody was like, no. They just joke with each other that way because we like to pick at each other. That's just our thing. It doesn't mean anything to us. I pick on her, she picks on me, and they took it as, oh my goodness, if I did that with my spouse, we'd end up in an argument. No, that just flows over. We live at a different energy level than somebody else, and that works, and that's fine. But if it was you and I that were married, suddenly we'd be having a fight every single day because of the way I speak, and it'd be like, nope, that ain't gonna happen. The same way that you guys made that decision, we will no longer do these things because that causes problems. Prayer is one of those things that we cannot, I would urge everyone in your pursuit of having a better marriage, Prayer is not one of those things that we add in at the end after we have reached the end of our will and problem solving, and now let's bring God into it. Is that prayer is one of those things that we need to start with, or if we forgot to start with it, stop what we're doing and add it to what's going on. And this is inclusive. If you're married to a non-Christian, well, then it's of vital importance to say, I'm going to add prayer, I'm going to do it so, as an example, to my spouse, so that they know there's somebody else involved in this decision making here that I defer to, that we are providing, sorry, I got ahead of myself, in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, that we say, but to the married I give instruction, not I, but the Lord, that the wife should not leave her husband, and the husband should not divorce the wife. But to the rest I say, in verse 12, that if any brother has a wife who is an unbeliever, she consents to live with him, he must not divorce her. And a woman who has an unbelieving husband, he consents to live with her, she must not send her husband away. That their thought at that time, in what they were writing to Paul, was, well, I became a believer, my spouse doesn't want to become, let me get divorced and I'll marry a believer. Wait. We've missed the point here. That is your opportunity to provide an example to your spouse of what godly decision making looks like. Doesn't mean that you've ruined your life marrying a non-believer. Doesn't mean that you're justified if a spouse loses their faith and walks away, that you go, okay, well that's it, I'm done. We provide the example through prayer, and maybe instead of that being done quietly in our own bedroom or wherever we choose to pray, but maybe that's done publicly and say, I'm going to take a moment to pray before we get involved in this discussion here, so that we bring that into the discussion. That's, again, I'm taking what I'm reading here and I'm trying to apply, so some of this is found in 2nd Mark, not the real Bible, but the way that I'm putting it into practice in my life, and I'm acknowledging the source. But I think I have this right. I'm open to discussion if you think I've got it wrong. But take the non-believing spouse and bring them into biblical decision making through prayer. To say, hey, this is not a two-person conversation, this is a third, and we're going to be deferential to that. We are going to honor God. So we have respect, we have love. Prayer gives us an avenue to access someone who is of greater import than us, who knows the end of all things, correct? That we say, I'm going to pursue a path of peace and righteousness so that I can discern your will, Father, as opposed to, I'm going at 100% speed, you come along with me, and God, you just justify my decisions. That's what happens when we're young, when we're driven, when we're doing what we want. There's a different way of things. I've done a lot of talking and I forgot to ask my questions that I have, but does anybody have something to add to this from experience? No? All right. We've all got it. Everybody, you're going to go from here and have perfect marriages, right? There's going to be no fights. There's going to be no problems.
Yeah, right.
Thank you very much. Problems will always exist. Why? Why will problems always exist in our marriage? Because we're two individual people. We have two different likes and dislikes. We have two different drives.
Interests are divided. Interests are divided sometimes.
Interests are divided. Always. Even when we're walking. How many of us have gotten into an argument with our spouse when we both agree at the end, but yet we get into an argument over our reasonings for getting us there, and it starts getting touchy, and you're like, whoa, whoa, wait a minute. We both agree that this is what we want, right? Yes. So why are we arguing? Because our interests are divided. We put information through separate filters and get there by different reasons. Go ahead.
Everybody that I encounter at the airport, co-worker, pastor, whatever, that hears that December 7th be 34 years for us, they say, what's the secret? I said, there's not one. Always try to keep it resolved. Don't worry about who's right or wrong. Keep it resolved. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're right all day long. If she's still upset, it isn't worth it. Because I said, there's been many times along the way that I've actually been right. We all men like to be right. But you say amen to that.
Amen.
But they said, wow. They said, and everybody that says, man, that's deep right there. That's love. I said, well, I don't care. I don't give a hoot about being right. I just want the situation resolvable so we're both comfortable with it. You know, because if I'm right, she said, well, you're right all the way up. You're still mad, so I still lose.
My experience is, here's what, talk to somebody in law enforcement and see if I'm right as to the information I'm giving. But here's what I learned after a career, is that I have a job that it is had a job, retired, had a job that first and foremost you realize you have to show up to work, but you don't have to go home at the end of the day if you do something wrong. And it was always ever present. And so what I learned in my little pea brain is I kept short accounts, meaning I learned, yeah, I'm irritated and I have a different way I want to go. But I said, sweetheart, this is a mountain out of a molehill. I'm not willing to stay angry about it. It's over and done with. And I might be grouchy. It doesn't mean that I had my halo instantly appear. I was grouchy about it, but I wasn't angry and I didn't dig my heels in because I didn't want my spouse to have the last thing that they said to me was an argument. As happened to far too many people that I worked with. Personally, this is just an aside, but personally, I was in for 25 years. There were 26 people that I worked with that died over the course of their duties. That changes your perspective to say, and not all of them were in the line of duty, but it doesn't matter if this person got into a vehicle accident on their day off, they're still not there anymore. If this person had an aneurysm and died, doesn't matter, I still knew them. It wasn't all in the line of duty related, but what I learned is no argument is of such import that I should continue to be angry for 3 or 4 or 5 days. Nothing justifies me withdrawing affection from my spouse and not talking to them for multiple days because I'm willful and prideful. Deal with it now. Yes?
Well, you know, scripture says don't let the sun go down in your anger. So there's many different types of approaches to this, in my opinion. To make it successful, God has given us the pattern to submit to Him first and then submit to each other. And if that mentality is not, and husbands, we are to be leaders, but yeah, that takes different forms in different times. It's not always the same. You can't use a hammer in a situation that a scalpel's needed. So, I mean, there's a lot of different ways that Scripture tells us, but the biggest approach is to do it in love with one another, not in anger. And that sometimes is where I know I slip up, is the anger side of things, but trying to make sure that it doesn't go on, because then it festers and then you start keeping score. And there's a reason why you're not supposed to let it go down in your anger, or the sun go down in your anger, because it does change your heart. It hardens it towards each other, and it's not healthy.
Absolutely. Did you want to? I thought I saw your hand. Sorry.
I have a strong habit myself. It's my way of having better control on my sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. And like if she and I go to talk about something, if I get so aggravated, or if it's like we're getting nowhere, and it's the same topic we've kicked around before, I'm like, you know, I'm not even doing it right now. I ain't going there right now. It ain't worth it. What's gonna happen is gonna happen. It is not worth frustration. And sometimes the topic, it's not worth frustration. Because at the end, the frustration isn't gonna make a big difference either way it goes. So it's not worth frustration.
Turn, if you will, please, to Matthew chapter 5. I'd like to end by this because the Sermon on the Mount, for me personally, is something that I keep circling back on. Love, respect, prayer, deference, not letting the sun go down on our anger. All of these concepts are good. I'd like to end by talking about our goal. Here on life, before we die, obviously our goal is what? I would like to end up in heaven. I want so much that I'm changing my life to mirror that belief that I have done. But there are goals, there are ways to attain that goal in life that if we remember and point ourselves toward. What do we call from verse 3, blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are those who mourn, blessed are the gentle. What do we call Jesus' Sermon on the Mount? The specific things that he talked about. What do we call those? The Beatitudes. That is a contraction. That is the 8 blessed attitudes in which to exhibit. Okay? That if we want to know how, okay, we've become a Christian. We believe in who Jesus is. We've been baptized. We're married. We're living with this person that we love, respect, honor, that sometimes is our stumbling block and most of the time is lifting us up. But how do I mirror the attitudes that I'm supposed to change from that I have to what? What am I looking in the mirror at? Because all I see is myself. I find myself personally coming back to, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to stop there. But learning the meaning of those two blessed attitudes. Blessed is the person who realizes that you are, for all of your accomplishments, that you are poor in spirit. You are the beggar sitting on the steps of the temple begging the Heavenly Father for any scrap of righteousness to get to heaven. You have none, you have nothing. The only thing we get is by a gift from God. And blessed is the person who gets to a point where they actually look at the sin in their own life and mourn over what they did and feel sad, as opposed to, I know I just cussed until the paint came off the wall, but God forgive me and I'll move on here. There's a difference in attitude, and that's all I would say to finish up. To concentrate on the attitudes that we bring so that we can have a better partnership between the two of us, and then we end up being a lot happier in life and in the walk that we have together as a family. So I leave this. If you don't do it right, it's your fault. If you do it right, it's my accomplishment. Thank you very much. I love you all very much. Appreciate it.
That's what